immense pleasure to welcome such a distinguished gathering of eminent personalities representing various fields of culture, peace and development. And also it is a great privilege to have with us the esteemed presence of the Maharaja, His Highness Sri Padmanabhadasa Uttararam Thirunal Marthanda Varma. On behalf of the Unity in Diversity and as Secretary General of Pravasi Nivasi Cultural Association, I have a pleasure to invite and welcome you all. First of all, I request His Highness Uttararam Thirunal Marthanda Varma Maharaja to occupy the dais. I invite Sri T.P. Srinivasan, former Ambassador of India in the UN. I invite Sri T. Balakrishnan IAS, Additional Chief Secretary, Government of Kerala. Mr. J. Christopher Das. Mrs. Maya Shahani, Vice Chairman, Unity in Diversity Forum. Mr. Prince, Coordinator and co-founder of this Unity in Diversity Forum. Now, I will request the Chairman of the Forum, Advocate K.J. Bose, to occupy the chair. And I will request him to chair the meeting. Thank you, sir.
His Highness Padmanabhadasa Uttararam Thirunal Marthanda Varma Maharaja, Mr. Jean-Christophe Baz, Mr. T.P. Srinivasan, Mr. T. Balakrishnan, Mrs. Maya Shahani, Mr. Peter Georgiowski, Mr. Hari Kumar, distinguished guests, brothers and sisters. It's a great honor and pleasure for all of us to have the distinguished presence of His Highness to this gathering. It's, in fact, a great matter of pride for all of us that His Highness has kindly consented to inaugurate today's forum session. I should repeat, it's a very rare or rarest of the opportunity that we have. Now, yesterday we had the first day of the session. It was a gathering with lots of multicultural presentations. I had my address, chairman's address. I would now request His Highness to officially inaugurate the function. and say a few words of message.
Mr. John, Mr. Gopal, Mr. T.P. Srinivasan, Mr. Balakrishnan, Mrs. Maya Shankar, Mr. Peter Husky, Sri Bose, Sri Hari Kumar, and members of a small UNO met this morning in what is advertised God's own country. I have only two things to try and communicate. One is, when I was young, that is decades and decades and decades before now, I had come across the word of the 1914-18 war, the League of Nations. I also had the pleasure of being in The Hague to see the old buildings and whatnot. But they are now part of a concept of being a museum. Then came the Second World War, and the UNO came into existence. Being somewhat old-fashioned, I would like to say something which is local, Indian. This morning I was reading the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. In the second chapter, there is one stanza, stanza 50, which is very informative, communicative to today's morning. The stanza says, Yoga Karmasu Kaushalam. That means equanimity, no biases in life, is an art of performing. Performing means living, existing, living with other people. That is what United Nations want. The world is one. The world has got two things to tell you that. One is a blue sky, and the other is a blue ocean. What is in my mind is that we have come from various parts of the world to come together for the betterment of man, for the betterment of humanity, so that we live in contentment and peace without any small difference of opinion bursting out into unhappiness for everybody. Maybe it's wrong for me to say so, but may I be permitted, because the anxiety in my heart, to do a bit of wrong spelling. We are all members of the United Nations. Let us not make a spelling mistake and make it the untied nations of the world. Let us keep together. In my country, in my ethos, I have been taught two very important things in life. Just two very small sentences. In once upon a time, it was the lingua franca of the world, Sanskrit. The very word means a complete language, Samyak Kritam Samskritam. It says the world is one family, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So you love all members of the family equally. There is no difference. The other thing is that when you think there is a little more than a family, then you think of in what you do, in what you think, in what you say. The world is one. That is, Lokaha Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. Let the world be happy that everybody be happy. That is a concept which I think is what United Nations stand for. United people must be united, and there must be progress in the world to achieve that. It's not easy, it's difficult, but it is a thing to be done every year, every month, every week, every day, every minute. The contribution must be constant. Going back to about nearly 79 years, I was once upon a time in my life a Boy Scout. And one of the maxims I was taught was, do a good turn every day. Let us all try and do that, so that we do a good turn, which is not only for you and me, but for all of us. A very happy morning that this conference is taking place translated into English, the eternal city of Ananta, endless, unbroken. Then we wish you all a happy sojourn in the town, in the city, and inaugurating this morning's conference.
The dignitaries on the dais.
Thank you. Thank you, Shah.
Have been inaugurated by Cyrus. Now we'll start our session. My dear brothers and sisters, it's in fact a very great honor, pride and privilege for me to chair this forum, the 3-day South Asia Forum for Unity in Diversity, Bridging Cultures, Building Peace and Development under the auspices of the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations. This all happened in Melbourne. We had a forum in Melbourne, first of its kind that Global Dialogue Foundation conducted. We were all, in fact, thrilled at the response that we had at the Melbourne Forum. People gathered, assembled, talked, discussed how to bridge different cultures and bring peace and harmony in the world. The aims of the forum, I will just read out briefly: to create a platform for the exchange of practical experiences, solutions and policy aimed at developing cultural understanding and cooperation among communities, and in so doing contribute to the mission of the UN Alliance of Civilizations, to learn from the experience of community leaders who are working successfully at the grassroots level to bring people of diverse cultures together, fostering dialogue, understanding and cooperation, to adopt a plan of action for the next year and to come up with a list of recommended individual actions people can implement in their daily lives to contribute to mutual understanding and cooperation. We have eminent speakers today for the morning session. Vienna and Government for India of International Atomic Agency, Vienna, and Ambassador to Austria and Slovenia. Shri T.P. Srinivasan has served in the Indian Foreign Service for 37 years in various countries. He is presently a member of the National Security Advisory Board of the Government of India, the Director General, Kerala International Centre, and an advisor to Asianet, and produces a weekly TV program on international issues entitled Videsha Vichara. He also contributes articles regularly to the Asia Wall Street Journal, the Times of India, the Tribune, and Rediff.com. We have another eminent speaker today, Sri T. Balakrishnan. Sri T. Balakrishnan IAS, is Additional Chief Secretary of Industries and Commerce at the Government of Kerala, Trivandrum. He is Chairman of the Board of Neetha Gelatin Limited, Traco Cable Company, Bamni Products Limited, Travancore Titanium Product Limited, and serves as his Director. He serves as a Director of Hindustan Newsprint Limited and Kerala State Industrial Development Corporation. Mr. Balakrishnan served as Director of Bharat Petroleum Corporation Limited from June 17, 2009 to June 26, 2010. I need to add here, I had the privilege and honor to have Mr. Sri Balakrishnan in Dubai in 1992 to honor our artists with presenting certificates to them, and it was Sri T. Balakrishnan. Then we have Mr. Tadashi Ogawa, who is the Managing Director of Japan Foundation Center for Global Partnership. He has a BA in Education from Vidisha University. Since joining JF in 1982, he held various roles, including Assistant Director, Japan Culture Center in Jakarta, has lectured extensively. Mr. Ogawa was Executive Assistant to the President of JF Director General Coordination and American Division, Japan Studies and Intercultural Department. He is a PhD candidate at the Graduate School of Asia Pacific Studies, Waseda University. We will now go on to the program. I will request our co-founder and CEO, Mr. Pizzi, to come to the dais and say a few words. But, I did not announce John Christoph Das, who will be the keynote speaker today. Mr. John Christoph represents the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations. He is currently Senior Advisor, Strategic Development and Partnerships at the United Nations Secretariat of the Alliance of Civilizations in New York. He served as Development Policy Dialogue Manager at the World Bank from 1999 to 2008. He is also the author of Europe, a reflection of Europe, published on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the fall of the Berlin Wall, with the contributions from the UN Secretary General and of 70 prominent leaders from around the world. I had my elaborate introduction of Mr. John Christoph yesterday. His experience, expertise in different fields, and was traveled widely around the world. All this will contribute knowledge to us, and he will part all this with us at his keynote address. May I now invite Sri T.P. Srinivasan to deliver speech.
Your Highness and distinguished guests, there is some amount of diversity in the way different nationals start their speeches. I don't know whether you have noticed that. If it is normally an American, he'll start with a joke. If it's a Korean or a Japanese, normally there will be an apology. If it's an Indian, there will always be a complaint. But I'm going to start with an apology and a complaint together. Because many of you may have seen that I was expected here yesterday. And when I was on the third hole of the golf course, I got a call from Mr. Bose asking me why I was not here. I said, was I supposed to be there today? He said, yes, I sent you the program. Yes, he did send me the program. But what had happened was, in my mind I had registered that it was the 7th and not the 6th. So my apologies. And the complaint is that you didn't give me a call before I went to the golf course. But what a pleasure it is to be here this morning, to be in an international group which is rather rare in Thiruvananthapuram. We do have international conferences here of specialized nature often, but this is one of those rare occasions when we are actually here to celebrate the universality of mankind. and also with the Association of the United Nations. This makes me very nostalgic about my 20 years at the UN. But His Highness is very right when he wondered whether the United Nations is really united. If you spend your time in the United Nations, you will never think of unity. You always think of what you can gain from disputes all around the world. Very rarely do we say what is common among us. Often we speak of the differences, how to prevent conflicts, how to resolve problems, how to rebuild countries destroyed by war, etc. So it is very rarely on such occasions or when the Secretary General spoke about the harmony of mankind. I think that is the only time we turn around and say, oh, we are here to serve the world as a united group rather than seek your own interests in the UN. One of the problems of the UN, as you know, is the fact that countries try to use the United Nations as an instrument of their foreign policy. The major nations are able to do so. The smaller nations are unable to do that, therefore they seek groups in order to secure for themselves the advantages that is provided by the United Nations. So by its very nature, by the very fact that people have got together basically to seek advantages for themselves, makes the United Nations somewhat disunited. But it's on these occasions that we have to sit back and think of what is common among all of us. And that way, I certainly welcome this initiative, and I'm happy to be associated with it. It is very easy to talk about diversity in the world. In fact, the word unity and diversity is normally attributed to Pandit Nehru, who used it in his early writings to describe India. But India is not alone in using this phraseology. You might know that there are other institutions and countries who speak of unity and diversity in a big way. The European Union, for example, the Baha'i Faith, for example, the Indonesians, the Papua New Guineans. I think there are several countries and several institutions who use unity and diversity as a kind of slogan or a kind of objective in their life because they see around them such diversity that they find it difficult to find unity or harmony in them. If you look at India, of course, there is no need to look for diversity. It is all over the place. Two Indians do not even look like each other in international fora. Someone might look like a Japanese representative. Someone might look like a European representative. So there is nothing that, appearance even, there is nothing that shows India's unity. So there is sufficient diversity here. But when we speak of diversity, what we forget is that we are not thinking about unity in a political sense. Many people believe that the British united India. But the concept of India, what is known as Bharatvarsh, is much older than the British ever came here. Longer than any historical or geographical fact which created India as a nation. And that is where you find India's unity. I've often wondered how is it possible for someone in Kerala being convinced that he must go to the Ganges to die. That was the system here. Once you had reached a certain age, people would renounce everything and walk towards the Ganges, the river in the north, without even knowing where it is, without even knowing where and how you reach there. Many of them probably did not reach there, they died on the way. Or how come that we have Nambudiris of Kerala going and, performing puja in Rishikesh, for example. So some inexplicable linkages exist in India. And those linkages are the ones that provide the nationhood of India, in spite of all the diversity that you see around us. But it's very rarely that one sits back and think about it, because day to day you are dealing with the problems of diversity and not enjoying the fruits of unity. And therefore, India is perhaps a great example of a civilization which is united in its basic objective, or the basic philosophy of being Indian. But of course, if we have to speak about differences, there are only differences all around us. Even within a state, or within a linguistic group, or within a religious group, everywhere there is diversity. And as we go along, we are marching towards the famous definition of clash of civilizations. We are in there, we are actually in the midst of a clash of civilizations. Many of us may want civilizations to converse with each other. Many of us may want civilizations to be united and work in harmony. And in India we believe that eventually, as the Maharaja said, if the world is a family, why should there be clash of civilizations? But why do clash of civilizations occur is something that we have to think. Is it because it is ordained that way? Is it because each civilization is looking for a different objective? I do not think so. Because if you read any holy book in any part of the world, in any religion, any language, the objective is all the same. There is no religion which proclaims that it has to destroy the others. There is no religion which does not proclaim peace and brotherhood as its objective. So where exactly is the conflict? How do these conflicts arise? I think that is basically the point that I made earlier. That each one of us, individually, as a group, collectively, as a nation, all of us are seeking advantages from the society on the basis of your diversity. And this is inevitable. Somebody was just asking me about my experience in Fiji. Fiji used to proclaim itself as the model for the world. They used to say, the tourist poster used to say, the world as it should be, was Fiji. And everyone presumed that the harmony, the multiracial harmony, the multicultural harmony that existed in Fiji would be there for all time to come. But that unity, that harmony, that nationhood existed only as long as the rights of the different groups were harmonized in a particular way. The moment it was challenged, the moment a section of the community felt deprived, the moment someone felt disenfranchised, Fiji became a tinderbox, nothing less. And once that innocence is lost, back in 1987, and I happened to be India's High Commissioner there, one section of the people felt that they had the divine right to rule over Fiji and nobody else. It was basically accepted by the rest. The so-called Fiji Indians accepted the fact that they would have a secondary role in the constitution of Fiji. Even after having accepted that, when the dilution of their powers went beyond even what they had accepted, the people revolted. What else are we seeing in the Middle East today? Solid foundations. Governments lasting 30 years, 25 years, 20 years. Everybody was considered very united at that time. But once the fire was lit by a young man in Tunisia who could not suffer the indignity inflicted on him by the military, he said he would rather die than accept this indignity. And that was enough to shake all these authoritarian regimes in one part of the world. So where the human greed or human desire to dominate others or to seek advantages for themselves, and that is where unity is disturbed and sometimes destroyed beyond redemption. So the only thought that I'd like to leave with you this morning, I'm sure there are many erudite speakers who will address this issue, is that probably unity is not what we should seek in diversity. Because absolute unity or uniformity is probably impossible to secure. Each group and each section, each human being has a place in the society. The important thing is not to be absolutely united, but to function harmoniously in the system that exists. Look at India's caste system. We all condemn it. We all say that this is uncivilized. But wasn't there some logic in that? At least initially when the caste system came into being, there was a certain harmony expected of it. There are certain Lakshman Rekhas drawn for various people to operate inside. And it worked. But when it became irrational, when the caste system became an instrument of exploitation, an instrument of oppression, an instrument of discrimination, that is when the caste system deteriorated into a system which became a cancer in the society. So if we go back for the search of harmony, search of a system in which each has a place which is determined or decided or allocated, and each one operates within that system for the benefit of mankind, then I think the diversity that God has ordained will serve the people. Uniformity is not the answer. Uniformity will never be accomplished. Conflicts will always be there. But if we can reach a stage where mankind can work harmoniously and use the talents and geniuses of the people in order to fit into the structure that has existed. Take international relations, for example. Is it possible for us to be equal, all states of the world? The United States will dominate as long as it is powerful. China will be struggling to dislodge the United States. So in all this, there is need for a pattern, a need for a structure in which all diversities can be accommodated. And that is possible because of the first point I made, that all human beings have accepted the fact that there is a single objective, a single dream that all of us have. So let us work for, not for uniformity, but for harmony among mankind. And that is probably the best that we can get. Thank you very much indeed.
you, Mr. Srinivasan. I would now request Mrs. T. Balakshmi to address the gathering.
Your Royal Highness, Sri Padmanabhadasa Uttarakhand Tirunal Martandavarma Maharaja of Travancore, Advocate Sri Sharachandra Bose, Ambassador T.P. Srinivasan, Mr. Sean Christopher Bass, Ms. Maya Shahani, Mr. Peter Gorjowski, Mr. Hari Kumar, delegates, friends. I think His Highness and Ambassador Srinivasan have painted a very good picture about what we are talking today, what the purpose of this gathering and the essence of it. I think I will only be adding to that. Someone said that if God were to make everybody equal in the morning, if God were to convert everybody into same religion, same race, same nationality, I would say same health, wealth and everything, by afternoon they will find sufficient reasons to divide and to start a fight. These are two forces operating in the universe at all times. There is a force which always tries to unite, and there is a force which always tries to divide. Like the yin and yang, this probably pulls in different directions. And we have to live with that. If you try to look for unity in the world, that will be very, very difficult to come. But I think what is more important is that we should be willing to, we should be happy to, and we should really strive to understand and appreciate the other people, the differences, the culture, the religion, the language. And once you start understanding more and more, and once you start interacting and appreciating, I think the differences, one will start to appreciate the difference rather than finding that as barriers to communication and interaction. Ambassador Srinivasan was talking about UN and his UN experience. In and around Queens in New York, close to the UN, there are almost about 125 nationalities living, I would say, in harmony within a 2 square kilometers area, 2-3 square kilometers area. And if you go to Dubai, probably I think in Asia you will, or probably today in the world, you will find much more diversity than any other place in that small city-state of Dubai, nationality-wise. And they are able to live together. Again, if you go to a country or a state where they all belong to probably same religion or same ethnic background, same language, same nationality, there are no shortage of conflicts. This will continue to be there. Again, religion is a unifying force. But many religions would like to include everybody. But when they start to expand by including more and more, some others feel threatened. And there the conflict comes. There are some other religions who are very happy to accept everybody, but not within, outside. We accept your religion, we accept your God, but let's be different. You be there, I'll be here, okay. There's another way of looking at it. So you will always find reasons to be different. But the important point, I think I would again take a cue from what Ambassador Srinivasan said, is that uniformness or unity or trying to make everybody similar is not going to work out. Some countries tried that. China, for example, during the Cultural Revolution, decreed that everybody should be wearing the same dress. There should not be any differences in income. There should not be any, ranks or differences. It did work for some time, but not for long. But today, if you look at the harmony, if you look at the slogan of China, they are now talking about, they are a country which talked a lot about the class struggle. And today they are talking about harmony. And I think that is probably the message we probably need to spread more. Let's accept the difference, let's try to understand that, and let's try to live in harmony. That way in schools in India, especially in Kerala, we try to teach all religions in the school itself. So that by the time you stand past the junior high school, you tend to get a little bit of general idea about at least the major religions, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam. One will get some understanding, some idea about that. Of course, later you can do that. But what we do not do is that we also should accept that there are some people who do not believe in God, do not believe in religion. They also should have a place, and their views should also be taught. Fair enough. There are many people who do that. At least in Kerala, we started doing that in a slightly different way. That has attracted a lot of criticism. But I think if we do think that children should know about all religion, there are some parents who also believe that children should be able to choose later. They should also be able to read and know that there is also another point of view which does not probably subscribe to the existence of God or religion. Fair enough. Other countries, or maybe like US or even France, do not encourage religious education within their secular system. Their secularism that way is considerably different from what we have been practicing in India. Something which is close to us, about 3 days back, we had an important ruling from the division bench of the High Court of Kerala. The background of that is that the government of Kerala, the state here, took the initiative of starting an Islamic financial institution. Initially, there was a lot of enthusiasm, and then when the company was formed, somebody challenged it in the court, saying that it is against the Constitution of India. The person who challenged that is a very important person because he was a minister in the federal government, a leading lawyer, a professor in Harvard, very well-known person. He had his point. His point was that, look, you are allocating certain amount from the state exchequer to promote this Islamic financial institution. And an Islamic financial institution, if it has to function, it has to function under the supervision of what we call the Sharia board. The Sharia board will give the guidance to see that how an Islamic financial institution will function. And if any of their products, services or actions violate the Sharia principle, they will point out or please correct that. So the petition was challenging that, when an organization created by the government is reporting to another organization which is taking inspiration from, say, Holy Quran, you are violating the basic principles of secularism of India. India is a secular country, it is enshrined in the constitution, and they argue that it is violating of the principles of the secularism and state not. There is a very clear provision which says the state will not promote any particular religion in India. So this is in conflict. That was the point he was making. Well, of course, we had our points also. That's where we brought in these differences between the secularism in India and the secularism as it is practiced in the US and other places. Secularism in India is not anti-religion. We are not excluding religion from the sphere of our work or our home or schools or anywhere. We only provide the opportunity for every religion to work harmoniously within the constitution, within the borders of India. So the argument of the state is that, look, even though we always subscribe to the view that the state will not promote any religion, but there are certain secular aspects which gets intermingled with the religious aspects. For example, if there are hundreds and thousands of people who are visiting a church or mosque or temple on a particular occasion, the state has to step in there to ensure security, safety, law and order, and proper regulation. So you cannot say that, look, people are going to church or people are going to temple, it's none of our business, you go and do what you want. No, you can't do that. They may be going there to pray for a religious purpose, that's perfectly fine. But as long as they are going there in large numbers, we have to be there, the state will have to be there to make sure that everything goes on well. We do. Not many people know that the government of India subsidizes the Hajj trip. Muslims will have to make, if possible, at least once in their lifetime a visit to Holy Mecca. And the government of India subsidizes that. There are Sikh pilgrims who go to the birthplace of Guru Nanak and various other places connected with that, and that is supported. When millions of people go to Kumbh Mela in North India, we make arrangements. In Sabrimala, that's a temple in Kerala, funds have been spent from the state exchequer to provide facilities like roads and other facilities. Well, be that as it may, the High Court accepted our point and then gave us a ruling about just 3 days back saying that the Indian secularism does allow participation of the state in these kinds of activities as long as the main objective is not promotion of religion. In this case, the Islamic financial institution is not meant to promote the religion of Islam, it is to promote the financial services. Again, we are coming to the question of diversity. The argument of the state is, look, you have the nationalized banks here, you have the scheduled banks here, you have the foreign banks here, you have the cooperative banks here, you have in a new situation in India what you call the non-banking financial corporation. They are not banks, but they do financial services. So you have all these things, so what's the harm in having one more thing? The choice, let the choice be given to the public. And the court accepted that. So that, I think, is probably what we are trying to do, that we will continue to be different. There is a lot of differences among us, but that is to be taken as a positive thing. And it is something, if all of us, as I said earlier in the chair, if all of us were to wear the same dress, the same color, the same thing, there will be a lot of, dryness in the whole system. I think the beauty, the God has that way created different climates, different regions, different flora, different fauna, and people are also in a way, look at that in their size, color, and all that, there are differences. But once we start appreciating that, once we start understanding that, and once we start see the beauty in that, I think we will be looking more at the harmony than at what we say, how that is used to divide us. Again, the problem comes when certain people, certain sections feel certain grievances, and they try to sort of work on that instead of trying to solve that. If they use that as a means to sort of separate, to sort of take it on others, or to divide, then you have a problem. In large societies, we will continue to have differences. We will continue to have some unfairness here and there. But I think the most important point is to find solutions for that by the philosophy of finding harmony in society, appreciating the differences, appreciating the diversity, and working together. And I think forums like that, initiatives like this by the United Nations, I think has a major role to play in understanding, appreciating, and I would say celebrating that diversity and difference, and always trying to find out that there's a lot of things, there's much more in common, while we also have some differences. There's always much more in common among the people of the world. Thank you very much.